I have never told this story to anyone before, but I want to tell it now. I've been in love before, and it was beautiful. I never knew love would find me until I met James. He was my own, my light at the end of the tunnel. Looking back now, I don't know how I could allow this kind of love slip away, but I did, because of 5 minutes of intense pleasure with his friend. My name is Dorcas, and this is my story. Before James, love wasn't something I believed in anymore. I had just ended a toxic relationship, one that left me feeling broken and unworthy. I told myself I was done with romance, that I'd focus on my career and build a life where no one could hurt me. But fate had other plans. I met James at a charity event I'd attended reluctantly. It was one of those evenings where everyone seemed to know everyone else, and I felt out of place. Standing near the refreshment table, pretending to be fascinated by my drink, I saw him. He wasn't the loudest or most charming person in the room, but something about his calm demeanor drew me in. When he approached, he didn't hit me with a cheesy line or try to impress me. Instead, he asked me how I was finding the event. It was such a simple question, yet the way he asked made me feel seen. That night we talked for hours, and by the end of it I was hooked. By the end of the night, I couldn't stop thinking about him. James had a way of making me feel safe, cherished even. He wasn't the kind of guy who swept you off your feet with grand gestures. He showed his love in quieter, more profound ways, remembering my favorite songs, leaving sweet notes in my bag, and holding me close when the world felt too overwhelming. Our love grew naturally. James wasn't flashy, but he was attentive, thoughtful, and incredibly kind. He remembered the smallest details about me, like how I loved lilies more than roses, and how I always added a dash of cinnamon to my coffee. It wasn't long before we became inseparable. James's friends often joked that he was too wholesome for me, but that was what I loved about him. He had this unwavering moral compass, this sense of right and wrong that made him so different from anyone I'd ever known. And then there was Stephen. Stephen was James's childhood best friend, the complete opposite of him in every way. Where James was reserved, Stephen was charismatic. He could light up a room with his smile, and his laugh was loud and contagious. At first, I didn't think much of him beyond his role in James's life. He was charming, yes, but James had my heart. Still, I couldn't ignore the way Stephen sometimes looked at me, like he knew something about me I didn't want to admit. I brushed it off as harmless, telling myself it was just Stephen being Stephen. The turning point came on a humid Saturday evening. James had hosted a small barbecue for friends in his backyard. The air was heavy with the scent of charcoal and grilled chicken, and laughter echoed as people sipped their drinks and swapped stories. James was his usual generous self, making sure everyone had enough to eat and drink. I was sitting on the porch swing enjoying the warm breeze when Stephen joined me. He handed me a glass of wine and sat down closer than I expected. "You and James," he said, swirling his drink. "You're lucky to have each other." I smiled. "I know, he's amazing." Stephen turned to me, his eyes piercing. "He is. But have you ever wondered, what if?" I laughed nervously. "What if what?" He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "What if things were different?" The air between us shifted, the casual friendliness replaced by something heavier, more dangerous. I should have walked away. I should have shut it down right then and there. But I didn't. Later that night, when most of the guests had left and James was busy tidying up, Stephen found me again, this time in the kitchen. I was rinsing glasses in the sink, the warm water running over my hands when I felt him behind me. "Dorcas," he said softly. I turned, and before I could say a word, he kissed me. The kiss was electric, a forbidden thrill that sent a jolt through my body. For a brief, fleeting moment, I let myself get swept away, but as quickly as it started, the reality hit me. I pushed him away, my heart pounding. "This is wrong," I whispered. Stephen nodded, his expression unreadable. "You're right. I'm sorry." He walked away, leaving me alone with my guilt. The days that followed were unbearable. I couldn't look James in the eye without feeling like a fraud. Every kind gesture, every loving word from him was a knife twisting in my chest. "Are you okay?" James asked one evening as we sat on the couch. "You've been distant." "I'm fine," I lied. But I wasn't fine. The weight of my betrayal was crushing me. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. The memory of that kiss haunted me, a constant reminder of my weakness. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. One quiet night, as James and I sat watching a documentary, I turned to him and said, "I need to tell you something." He paused the TV, concern etched on his face. "What is it?" Tears welled up in my eyes as I confessed everything. I told him about the kiss, about the moment of weakness that had shattered our trust. James listened in silence, his face unreadable. When I finished, he stood and walked to the window, his back to me. "Why?" he asked after what felt like an eternity. "Why would you do this?" "I don't know," I sobbed. "It didn't mean anything. It was a mistake." He turned to me, his eyes filled with hurt. It meant something to me. For weeks, we lived in a fragile truce. James didn't leave, but the warmth between us was gone. Our once vibrant love had turned into a hollow shell of what it used to be. In the end, James decided he couldn't stay. "I love you," he said as he packed his things, "but I can't get past this." Watching him walk out the door was the hardest thing I've ever done. Now, years later, I still think about James and what we had. I think about the love I lost because of one foolish, fleeting moment. If I could go back, I'd choose differently. But life doesn't give us do-overs. All I can do is carry the lesson with me, a painful reminder of the price of betrayal. I've never told this story to anyone before now, because it's a reminder of the worst parts of me. But perhaps by telling it, I can finally let go and forgive myself, even if James never will.